Hi guys, it's Mrs. Lamb here, and I'm going to continue teaching you about Jacksonian democracy. Specifically, we are going to talk about the time during Jackson's presidency when the Native Americans were forcibly relocated. President Andrew Jackson supported relocating the Native Americans to lands west of the Mississippi River. Congress passed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, and this was at the request of Jackson. The federal government paid Native Americans to move west. That makes it sound as if it was done in a fair way, and it really was not done in a fair way. And many of these Native Americans did not get their promised payment for like another 30 years. This sentence also makes it look like it was a choice, and it really was not for the Native Americans. So they were forced off of their ancestral lands. Jackson also sent officials to negotiate treaties with the southeastern Native Americans. In 1834, Congress created the Indian Territory, or Indian Reservation, and it was a region in present-day Oklahoma for Native Americans from the southeast. This is a bill that went through Congress to forcibly relocate the Native Americans. All right, so the Cherokee Nation refused to give up its land in Georgia. Treaties of the 1790s recognized the Cherokee people as a separate nation with their own laws, but Georgia did not recognize the Cherokee laws. In the Supreme Court case, Worcester versus Georgia in 1832, the Cherokee sued the state. Basically, what had been happening is the state had been forcibly taking Native American land of the Cherokees, looting and burning their villages, and basically harassing the Native Americans. Chief Justice John Marshall of the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Georgia had no right to interfere with the Cherokee. Further, the court stated that only the federal government had the authority over matters involving the Cherokee. President Jackson disagreed and supported Georgia's efforts to remove the Cherokee. So basically, here's what happened. The Supreme Court case sided with the Native Americans. The president of our country and the state of Georgia ignored the Supreme Court ruling. Georgia continued what it had been doing, and the president allowed Georgia to continue taking Native American land. And then the president even went so far as to forcibly remove the Native Americans. This is Samuel Worcester, who the case is named for, who was the plaintiff in the case Worcester versus Georgia. And basically, he was a Christian missionary that was living amongst the Native Americans. And, he was basically working on their behalf. And one of the things that Georgia was trying to do was force people like Worcester that were missionaries out of the Native American villages, saying that they could not be there. They could not live amongst the Native Americans. And of course, Worcester fought against that, and technically he did win his case. However, it didn't really matter because our president ignored it. In 1832, a few Cherokee signed a treaty giving up their land, but most of the 17,000 Cherokee refused to honor it. So basically, here's what happened. A few people who really truly didn't have the authority with the Cherokee Nation signed this treaty. But the vast majority of the Cherokee did not agree with this, did not want to sign this treaty, so refused to honor it. General Winfield Scott and an army of 7,000 federal troops came to remove the Cherokee and threaten force if they did not leave. The long Cherokee march west began and became known as the Trail of Tears, the trail along which they cried. This is a painting, I guess, a picture showing the Trail of Tears, just to give you an idea, the forced removal. Most people are walking. You can see people carrying their children. Only some are on horseback or in wagon, but most are being forced to walk the whole way. And, rain, sleet, snow, didn't matter. They were forced to walk. Not enough food, not enough water. A lot of Cherokee died along this. At least a fourth of all the Cherokee people died along this trail. So there is some Native American resistance. Black Hawk led a group of the Sauk and Fox people uh, back to Illinois in 1832. That's a typo. It should say back to Illinois, in 1832 to recapture the land given up in a treaty. State and federal troops refused to use force to chase them into the Mississippi River. I'm sorry, the state and federal troops used force to chase them into the Mississippi River and slaughtered most of the Native Americans as they tried to flee westward into present day Iowa. The troops killed hundreds of the Native Americans. The Seminole people of Florida successfully resisted removal. They went to war instead. In 1835, the Seminole and a group of African Americans together attacked white settlements along the Florida coast. They used guerrilla tactics successfully against the American soldiers. By 1842, more than 1,500 American soldiers had died. The government finally gave up and let some of the Seminole remain in Florida. However, many of them had died in the Long War, and many were captured and forced to move west. Only a few scattered groups of Native Americans lived east of the Mississippi River after 1842. Most had been removed from their lands. They gave up more than 100 million acres east of the Mississippi and received about $68 million and 32 million acres of land west of the Mississippi. They lived in reservations, which were divided up by Indian nations. This map shows you where the Native Americans did live and where they were forced to move to. So you can see the Cherokee in Georgia were forced in this part of the Indian Territory. You can see the Seminole, which were from Florida, what we now know as Florida, were forced here with the Creek. There's where the Creek came from. And you've got the Chickasaw and the Choctaw, and you can see there's a Chickasaw and there's the Choctaw. So you can see where they were forcibly moved. All right, so the next section that I want to talk about is Andrew Jackson and the bank. Andrew Jackson went to war against the Bank of the United States. President Jackson challenged the Bank of the United States. He attacked it for being an organization of the wealthy in which the people had no control. Private bankers ran the bank, even though it was chartered or given a government permit to operate by the federal government. In 1832, Nicholas Biddle, the bank's president, applied early for a new charter, even though the charter was good until 1836. Senators Clay and Webster, friends of Biddle, used the bank as a ploy to try to defeat Jackson and allow Clay to become president in 1832. They figured that Jackson would veto the charter and lose support. Jackson did veto the bill and denounced the bank for not caring about the poor and only the wealthy. So in 1832 presidential election, many people supported Jackson's veto of the bank charter. He was reelected, receiving 219 electoral votes to Clay's 49. Martin Van Buren was elected as vice president. Jackson decided on a plan to kill the bank after he was reelected. He ordered the withdrawal of all government deposits from the bank and placed them in smaller state banks. In 1836, Biddle refused to sign a new charter for the bank, and it forced the Bank of the United States to close. Jackson did not run for a third term. The Democrats selected Martin Van Buren, who faced opposition from the Whigs, a new political party that had included former National Republicans and others opposed to Jackson. Van Buren easily defeated his Whig opponents and became president. Then the Panic of 1837 hit right after Van Buren took office. Land values dropped, investments suddenly fell off, and banks failed. Thousands of businesses closed and hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs. During the Depression, thousands of businesses closed and hundreds of thousands of people lost their jobs. Prices rose so high that people could hardly afford their basic needs. Van Buren believed in a laissez-faire, or the principle that the government should not involve itself in the nation's economy. So he did little to help the economic problems. The situation worsened, and the administration did take a few steps, although they had little effect on the crisis. The Depression turned all the Jackson supporters against his friend and colleague, President Van Buren. Then you've got the Whigs coming to power. So the Democratic presidents had been in office for 12 years. Now the Whigs thought it was time to win the 1840 election. They nominated William Henry Harrison, a War of 1812 hero like Jackson. John Tyler was Harrison's running mate. The Democrats nominated Van Buren. The Whigs needed the support of the laborers and the farmers who had voted for Jackson. A log cabin was their symbol to show that Harrison was a man of the people. Their campaign slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too, because Harrison gained fame in the Battle of Tippecanoe, defeating Tecumseh's followers. William Henry Harrison became the first Whig president. He died in office 4 weeks later of pneumonia. John Tyler became the president, although winning the election as a Whig, he had once been a Democrat. As president, he was a strong supporter of states' rights and vetoed some bills sponsored by the Whigs. Many members of his cabinet resigned. The Whigs expelled him from the party due to his disloyalty. And there's my works cited page. So that is all that I have for you today. I hope you guys have a great day.